A true monopoly is a firm which is the sole producer of a good or service with few or no close substitutes. That gives us two avenues with which we can reduce monopoly power. We can either start producing more substitutes, or we can have more firms produce this product. Here we'll discuss the latter. What does it look like when there are two firms, or three, or four? An oligopoly is a market structure where there are only a few firms producing a particular product. There are lots of examples of oligopolies in the world. Only a handful of companies produce most of the movies you see. Likewise, if you want to get cellular service, there are only a few options to pick from. Oligopolies are most often seen in industries with huge startup costs, like making movies or offering cell phone service. The key is that these companies still have some market power. Verizon keeps prices above marginal cost because there isn't enough competition to fill the void they create. And the costs to enter the industry and compete with Verizon are so high that it isn't worth it for many to try. The problem with monopolies was that there wasn't any competition to push prices down. And so the only limit on a monopoly is what people are willing to pay. So what about oligopolies? Is a little competition enough to overcome this problem? It depends. The Cournot model, developed by the 19th century French mathematician Augustin Cournot, sees the oligopolist problem as trying to predict the quantity their competition will produce. If we know the quantity our competitors will choose, we can compute how much demand will be left for us and respond optimally. Cournot's great insight is that this is pretty predictable behavior, and so each firm will be able to predict what their competitors will do because they can assume their competitors will be trying to maximize profits too. When there's only one firm, the Cournot model predicts the same outcome as our regular theory of monopolies. But as we add firms to this industry, competitive behavior slowly chips away at the monopolist markup until we reach the perfectly competitive outcome when there's a large number of firms. But the Cournot model shows us that with just a few firms in the market, there's an incentive to not undercut your competitors too much. The most profitable outcome is one of strategic production, which keeps the price above marginal cost, increasing profits at the expense of some market inefficiency and deadweight loss. Oil production is an industry with only a handful of large firms in it, where each firm produces a nearly identical product, and the Cournot model applies well here. These firms could increase production of oil and push the price down, but they strategically choose to limit production in order to keep the price high. In fact, in circumstances like these, there's a huge benefit to collusion, whereby the individual producers all join together and agree to behave as if they were a single monopoly. For many decades, oil production was controlled by a cartel of Anglo-American producers known as the Seven Sisters. But in the 1960s, their dominance was countered by OPEC, a cartel of state-owned oil producers in the Middle East and Africa, which now control nearly half the world's oil production. Their efforts have been so profitable, and again, this is at the expense of market efficiency, that many other countries like Mexico and Russia voluntarily join in OPEC's supply cuts in order to support and empower OPEC. An alternative to the Cournot model is the Bertrand model, named after another French mathematician, Joseph Louis Francois Bertrand. In this model, firms offer similar or identical products and compete for customers by offering the lowest price. Bertrand took issue with Cournot's model because Cournot's model assumes that all firms will accept the market clearing price. That is to say, if your competitor reduces production, it means you will automatically raise the price you're charging and keep demand constrained, rather than just stealing the market from your competitor. Bertrand noted that if firms are setting the price they charge customers, then the price, not the quantity, will be the focus of their competition, and they will continue to undercut each other. If you imagine that there are just two firms, the Cornell model predicts that each will strategically produce slightly more than half of what they would produce if they were a monopoly. So they cut their production a lot with just one rival relative to having the market all to themselves. This strategic behavior does give them the highest possible profit, but only if they give up control of their price. Bertrand contended that there's a huge incentive to lower your price slightly and capture the entire market from your now overpriced competitor, regaining the monopoly position. But of course, your competitor will then have an incentive to do the same, and each firm will keep undercutting each other until all the profits have been cut away. It's a race to the bottom, and the Bertrand model predicts that with any competition at all, you end up at the competitive equilibrium, where price is equal to marginal cost. Bertrand's model applies well in places where there are large returns to scale, and each competitor could easily expand production to capture their competition's customers without pushing their own marginal costs much higher. That isn't the case with oil, but it is the case with a lot of consumer electronics. There are only a handful of major laptop producers, but each of them try to undercut the others by offering lower prices. Hewlett-Packard could pretty quickly expand production to meet the demand if Dell suddenly shut down. And the reverse is also true. All firms want to reduce production in order to push up the price of their product, but when competition is willing and able to swoop in and fill that void, it will be a failed gambit, and the price will reach the market equilibrium.